Welcome to the Trades Podcast, a podcast about the business of home improvement and promoting the trades to young adults.
Yes. What is up, everybody? Happy days. It's an exciting day. We're on the Trades Podcast. I'm Danny.
And I'm Jeff.
And exciting news because we got some big news, just kind of pushing forward into the 2026 year. Jeff and I, we're going to be hitting 200 episodes coming up pretty soon, and we're excited to be announcing that for everybody out there in the San Diego area. So hopefully you guys come out and come support us for 200 episodes of the Trades Podcast. But today we got awesome guests. We got Zachary Greg Hanson in the house. He's an author. He's a entrepreneur. He has a lot of industry news to kind of express out there, and ideas, and obviously a book. Jeff's about to show it up on the screen. If you're listening on Spotify, you probably won't see it. But Zach, what's up?
Wow, man. Well, I appreciate the intro, and for Jeff holding up the book, The Trade Gap. I'm super excited to be here and chatting with both of you and talk all things trades and industry.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Very excited, Zach. I was reading the book and got a lot of questions.
Well, I've got some answers. They might not be good answers, but I'll do my best as we go through and talk about everything.
Yeah. Well, let's start it out. Where are you located at right now? Where are you residing? What's going on in the Zach Hansen world right now?
Man, what's going on in the Zach Hansen world? So I am based between two places, both in Idaho. So my wife, myself, and our 3 children split our time now between our very remote cabin where we used to live full time for 6 years in Atlanta, Idaho, with a population of 35 people year round down an 80-mile dirt road. And now Boise, as my oldest daughter is now starting school this fall. So our gravitational orbit's kind of pulling us more and more back to the city, unfortunately, in a lot of respects, but fortunately for some others. But yeah, that's kind of where I reside, and what I do in my day-to-day world is still splitting my time between trades advocating and doing my own trades work, as well as being executive in the AI tech space, actually working for a startup out of Boston, of all places, all focused on data, machine learning, and that realm. So really all over the place, kind of a master of none scenario here.
You've got probably a heck of a degree in juggling to be able to do all that stuff, Zach.
Certainly. And the kids definitely help with that. They make me I am an expert in that. My wife was actually out of town this past weekend, and I was juggling all 3 kids by myself for 3 days. So I'm kind of coming out of the fog of war on that one over the weekend right now.
Earned a little more respect for what the wife does.
Yeah, a little bit more street cred too with her. So
saw you come back with a couple scars and stuff.
Oh yeah, I definitely did not declaw my kids. Someone said it was like herding cats, and I said it's probably easier to herd cats. And I'm a trapper, do a lot of trapping up here in Idaho, from wolf trapping to government trapping, and recently had to release some mountain lions from a trap. And man, I will take that any day over 3 days with the kids. It's way less dangerous dealing with an angry mountain lion than it is 3 toddlers.
Right? Especially when they can actually talk to you. That's awesome. Well, that's great news. I mean, you got your family, man. You're out there in Idaho, and living the sounds like the American dream for what a lot of people would say. And you're doing it, man, and you're grinding. And I think one main thing is, we've always talked about that through the Trades and the Trades Podcast, is everybody has their own journey on their own path on how they're getting there. And the trades, if you involve that into your life and it's something that you're exposed to or have some sort of skill, it can take you further and into many different locations. Like you mentioned, doesn't matter where you're at, whether in a small town or in closer to the city, you can definitely use those skills.
That is 100% correct. And honestly, that's the genesis of my story, because I grew up in the Southeast, like Atlanta, Georgia, ironically, Atlanta, Idaho. But I grew up very urban. I grew up kind of blue collar adjacent, and I grew up in the world where, even in my high school, there was no shop class. There was no, anything like that. And to be frank, like when I grew up, and went to high school in the early 2000s, it was very much if you went to the local tech school, you were kind of part of the dumb crowd. Like it was very much looked down upon in my generation to go into the trades. And I talk a lot about this in the book on the history of how we got on our path of being college or bust. But, all of our school curriculum was incentivized around SAT scores. You go to college. And, growing up in the 90s, we were promised you go to school, you'll get a great job. And that's what I grew up on. And I believed it. I took it hook, line, and sinker, and I kind of pushed everything else back. Now, my dad's an engineer. He would have me doing like little things like sweating pipes when we had like plumbing issues. Like I had a little bit of hands-on knowledge, but ultimately it was, I pushed it all aside and I went down the college path. And in the book, I talk all about how, as a cautionary tale, like there was no pot of gold at the end of that rainbow. Like I've been very fortunate in my professional career of kind of clawing my way into something that was productive. But ultimately, I just grew up like where trades were shunned. And it took me 30 years to kind of come full circle and realize what I might have missed out on.
Yeah. So, Zach, you brought up something that I want you to dive in just a little bit deeper for SAT scores. So the average, young person that's in high school and they're taking their SAT test, there's a ton of books and, pressure and stuff like that to excel in that. But what that doesn't address, and that's what I want your opinion or experience on, is for people that don't test well, but have natural gifts in other areas that make them actually smarter in other areas. So what's the school system missing on that SAT score test?
Well, I don't think it's necessarily missing. The SATs do what the SATs are intended to do. It is to measure some level of cognitive ability. Now, me personally, I was not a great tester. I did terrible on the SATs. I was just so bullheaded that I kind of plowed through and went to like a lower tier state school because I didn't have great SAT scores. So the SATs do exactly what the SATs are meant to do. It's meant to measure a child's ultimately ability to regurgitate information. It does not necessarily in all instances provide like a full panel of like IQ or intellect. It is you study to take a test. And if you're good at taking that test, you're going to do well. So it misses out on everything you're referring to, Jeff. Like, I was better with my hands. I just didn't have a chance at that time to express that because it was in my school. There wasn't even that option. So, what I think is missing is that full scope human. And I talk about it in the book of like, what does it mean to be generally educated? Our colleges are all general education now, but it doesn't touch anything related to, practical skills in life. You don't even learn how to balance a checkbook in high school or college even. So I think what's truly missing in our education is like looking at the whole human. Like, what does it mean to be generally educated? If you cover the spread, you're going to have people that were never meant to swing a hammer that are very book smart. And they might come up with the very next best algorithm that changes the way AI works or gets us to Mars, whatever it is. And we should like allow those kids to grow in that. But at the same time, you have kids who like really want to understand the, fluid dynamics of water or anything else that's of interest in how metal goes together, how we build the buildings we walk in. But that side of the equation is just completely overlooked, and we over-index on the book smart aspect in a lot of our education programs.
Yeah, and that overlooking piece from the schools or the system, we have recently had some guests that have been trying to turn that page a little bit through some of their curriculum or that they were offering into their general ed, even just for the adult schools, allowing them to come back and get some sort of credential through a trade. So there are some moves that I believe that are kind of turning that a little bit of the dial. Like you said, on a massive scale, I went to that same type of school that was pushing college, SATs. You go to school, same thing. And this was the mid 2000s where it started really in middle school, almost probably even as early as elementary, where it was influenced. It was check out the schools, bring your university shirt to school one day and represent what university you may think of or may you want to go to. So it's instilled in you. And same thing on my part, where I would have been exposed a little bit to more of the landscaping side of things, using the tools, building fences with my uncles out in the backyard, things like that. But when it came down to any of the practical, how to live your day-to-day life or handle even a schedule, sometimes would be even a hassle.
100%. And I think, in the book too, I cover the history. Is interesting in the United States. We've done so much oscillating between, being pro trades, not pro trades, pro college degree. I mean, we haven't really dropped off of that one yet, but it's oscillated. And the history is really interesting. And I go into detail in the book, like from when it started in really the early 1900s, when there was some funding for agricultural education in the U.S., specifically in the South. And there's been different areas of investment from the federal government and state governments for this training over time, kind of peaking in the 60s when we had metal shops, wood shops, everything in high schools. College was still affordable. So you kind of had that influx of like, you can go both ways and you can still be successful in whatever career you wanted. And then after the 60s, it really kind of dropped off from a perspective of being pushed as a viable long-term career opportunity, up until today, when we're now all sitting here on a podcast talking about how we change that and tilt the scales back in the opposite direction.
Yeah, but so one of the things I kind of missed out of the book, Zach, was what inspired you to write the book?
Yeah. Yeah. I guess, I kind of glossed over that one in the book itself, but I mentioned I've been, so I went down that path of being pushed to college. I did go to college. I got, according to my dad, who was an engineer, and he proved to be right, a relatively non-paying degree, which was political science. I thought maybe I'd be a lawyer or something like that. I thought better of that after I got my degree. I couldn't really find work. I ended up working for the Department of State, moving overseas for a few years, living in Russia, Kyrgyzstan, Saudi Arabia, which was really cool, but didn't pay much of anything. Came back stateside, couldn't find any real work in the industry. So what did I do? I doubled down and paid more debt to get more schooling, because that's what you do. So I got a master's degree, and then ultimately was able to kind of just work my way into a very low paying job at a corporate company called IBM. I thought after 6 years of higher education, I'd have, at least $100,000 a year job. Well, it turns out I had a $50,000 a year job. So it wasn't even covering, really, between my rent and everything, my school debt. So it was just one of those like really like eye-opening moments. But that said, I fought my way up through kind of the corporate ladder. I'm still working in AI, machine learning. I have a good wage. But to answer your question, Jeff, what happened was I at some point went through a divorce. I moved to the middle of nowhere, Idaho, still working my day job at a corporation. When I moved out to the middle of nowhere, I had zero skills. I couldn't change the oil in my own car. I didn't even really know how to start a fire in my wood burning stove in the cabin that I had. And I kind of, for a few years, went through this crash course of just learning like basic self-reliance, hunt, trap, my trailer breaks. Oh no, what do I need to do? I need to weld it back together because there's no like Home Depot nearby. There's no like tradesmen out there to help me. And it kind of was a forcing function to just learn some basic skills. And then fast forward to 2023, I'm the head of machine learning at a publicly traded company in Boston, and I lose my job. Just layoff, new executive leadership, bam, gone. And I thought, no big deal. I have followed the white picket fence manifest destiny calling of saying, keep 6 months of savings, you'll be good, you'll find work in that 6-month period. Now I've got 3 kids, I've got a wife, I've got 2 mortgages. 3 months goes by, no ability to find work. 4 months goes by, I start kind of sweating a little bit. 6 months goes by and we're out of those savings. 7 months goes by and now I'm thinking about liquidating assets to pay my bills. 8 months goes by, there's nothing on the horizon for me, and I start having that kind of oh crap moment. And what was very fortunate for me was it turns out that in those few years that I had moved to Idaho, I had built skills. I had built a trade, which was trapping. And for the next 4 months after that 8-month mark, it happened to be going right into trapping season. And I just like tripled down. I did more trapping. I worked for the Idaho Fish and Game. I did some government trapping, and I ended up paying our bills and our mortgages and floating us, not with an excess or anything, just by trapping, by doing a trade or a skill that I had inadvertently picked up on the side, plus a little taxidermy. After that 4 months, bills paid. I did find another role for lesser pay, but I found a role that was going to help me build back up, everything that we lost over that almost a year, 11 months of being unemployed. And that was the eye opener for me. I was like, I am just as at vulnerable, I guess, to the changing tide of technology and AI and everything else as anybody else. I thought I was kind of like in a little secure bubble, and I was. And so after that, I went and did night school and got a welding cert. I am currently, while still working full time, getting my journeyman's license for electrical, right? I'm doing night school and getting some hours here and there. Now, mind you, it's probably going to take me 10 years to achieve that if I still work full time. But I decided that I was no longer going to be vulnerable and not have a skill to fall back on. And this is kind of coming from that knowledge worker perspective. Um, and that's where it's at. And that's what inspired the book. I'm like, wait, why did I go through all that? Why was it college or bust? Like, this hasn't paid off. I see friends that are going through the same thing. All the friends that I kind of thought were, I hate to say it, but like going down the wrong path in high school who did go into the trades, they're killing it. They're doing great. Like, where was this disconnect? And that's what inspired me to write the book, was to do the historical research, how we got to where we're at, how can we change it moving forward? And it's kind of based off my own cautionary tale of somebody who went college or bust, and kind of got kicked in the teeth.
Yeah, I mean, would you say that was a point in time in your life, like a rock bottom moment, like like almost not knowing what to do? Like,
I'm a very much an optimist, so no, I don't have many rock bottom moments, to be very honest. But yeah, I mean, it was scary. Yeah, I think that's the best way to describe it. Is I had to provide for my family. I never had even contemplated that scenario because I'd seen layoffs before. It just never happened to me. And then all of a sudden, when you're in it, and then like your expectation of what would happen after that is completely different, and you start just burning through any cash reserves you have, and you get to zero, that is petrifying. Um, so yeah, I mean, from that perspective, yeah, maybe rock bottom, but ultimately, like, I was going to push through no matter what, even if we had to live in a shack. But it was scary, very, very scary.
yeah, it's one of those moments where when I was listening to that, I mean, one, it's real, it's raw, and it's exactly what happened. But I think a lot of people through the country have gone through the same exact thing. Maybe they just feel like they haven't heard it from someone else to know that, hey, that's kind of like similar to my story. What's going on with me? And it's been amazing. I mean, through this process of the Trades podcast, we had a college. It's a school college here in San Diego, throughout Southern California. And even one of the instructors, after learning a little bit more about what we were doing, he ended up doing the same thing. He's going to school, night school, for to be an electrician also. Knowing of what skill he can hone in on and utilize for the rest of his life, and recognizing it. And you're a highly educated man. I mean, like you said, I mean, when you said, he was like, well, what's the next step? Obviously, if to get more opportunities for myself, go back to school. And that's what people mention, is like, well, then just adds more debt. But does it promise you being able to get that job, you being able to get work, you being able to provide, you being able to pay for what it is that, was almost pretty much promised,
Mhm.
by going the route that, that a lot of us are pressured to go into.
100%.
Yeah. What do you think, Jeff? How was it for you in back in the school days? What were they pushing for you guys?
Well, in the mid to late 70s, junior high school, there was shop class, wood shop, welding, um, auto mechanics or auto body stuff. Never did the auto stuff. I probably regret that because I've been paying ever since. Um, but yeah, it definitely left a chance for me. And I don't know, circumstances didn't push me into college. But as I owned my own business and um, worked through that, I did go back and take a lot of education classes to run a business. So there's
Yeah.
definitely, everybody's got their own path,
Mhm.
So I always say, I think one of the things I've learned is, if you can come out of school and, start earning a wage using your hands, I think you actually learn a little easier when you have stuff to relate it to if you wait a few years to go to college. You miss a lot of the social part of college, but for the finance part of it, that's, I think, why a lot of people ultimately uh, get the most out of college is for that, not so much the fraternity experience, sorority
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah. I did not have that experience in college. I avoided that. Just exactly, it was a pay to play thing. You have to pay to be in a sorority, and I was, scraping by working 3 jobs in college, anyways. I should have been working in something with my hands. That would have been smarter. But yeah, I agree, and I think that point, Jeff, is great. Like the one thing that I want to make clear, like that I don't do in this book, is completely dog or say don't go to college. There are a lot of benefits. I think what has not been clear for young kids today is you need to have a plan when you go to college. Like whether that's taking a little bit of time, then going and having like a target of what you really want to learn is vital, because like I just dove in and it was general education. I was taking like music dance theory to fill credit hours. Like I could have been taking like a more specific finance course to take a business or like to build a business. And that's where I think the trap is. Like I have nothing against the credentialing of college if you have like a real goal in mind and you understand what the actual ROI is on whatever you're going to invest.
Yeah,
And
the
that's what
the outcome.
yeah.
Yeah, the ROI, the outcome. What's it going to do for you when you're done? That's where think a lot, like you were saying, Zach. A lot of kids are missing the target.
Yeah. I mean, that brings it back to, I think, what trades are like the most important, and for us as the trades podcast, I mean, we've had a lot of deck builders, carpenters, electricians, plumbing is something that we focused on, home builders. But I mean, for you, Zach, I mean, like you said, you touched on electrical a little bit on even on the uh, um, welding piece. What do you see the most top like trade that people should be looking into for the next 10, 20 years, or would be just crucial to society, I guess?
I think it depends on a lot of factors, like where you're at in your stage of life, right? So if you're a high school kid coming up, I would be focused on, you know, some of the trades as it relates to, technology, whether that's to support building data centers, whether that's to support um, drone manufacturing or building submarines, all the things that go into what make our country great. Like build a skill around that. Maybe that's, polyfusion welding. I don't know. Or maybe that is plumbing. It could be any of those. But there's also this like I have a much broader definition of trades. Like if you know how to knit, that's a trade to me. Like if you had to have, something to fall back on that you could go sell on Etsy, you could knit some socks. I don't care. Me trapping was a trade that literally paid my bills for 4 months. Like that is a trade. So I think there's like, especially for adults who are already maybe in their knowledge working career, like for me, somebody who like sits and works on spreadsheets or in front of a computer that could very possibly get replaced by AI. It's like, start filling some of your free time with stuff that's interesting to you. Like I consider writing books a trade. That makes money. Like that's great. If you like to write books. If you like to, be in the woods, become a outfitter or a guide for people in the off season. Like those are things that you can fall back on that are a passion of yours and can actually make you money in the event of you, losing your job or, falling on hard times like that. I think that's where, my vision for people who are late career is to turn your interest into something that could make money if you needed it to, versus like the younger kids who I would say definitely get into a business that you could build, grow, purchase, buy later on that is going to be, financially viable for 10, 20, 30 years.
Yeah. I really like the way you've broadened the view of what a trade is. I mean, I would have never considered trapping if I was making a list of trade skills, you know.
Well, I
Um,
mean, it's just like pest control. It falls in that same thing. Like I mean, that is a trade as well. Like there is animal control. And that's kind of what trapping falls into too. And like the fur market's coming back. I just saw for first time ever on CNN, I saw an article about people going back to wear real fur because, you know, fake fur is all, has fossil fuels essentially. It's all fuel driven to build it. It's not compostable. You can't put it in a landfill. Real fur is timeless. Like, you might go into your great grandma's closet and find a mink coat as long as it wasn't eaten by moths or bugs. Like, it's in great shape and you can wear it for another 100 years. And then if you do get tired of it, throw it in a landfill. It's biodegradable and it's, all the critters out there that you're actually trapping are usually nuisance animals and usually are very much renewable. It's one of the best renewable resources that we have. But yeah, I mean, that's a trade.
what a great perspective on it.
Yeah, that piece, like you mentioned, it really depends where you are in your life. And like you said, it can also be a regional demographic piece to it too, of what is being asked of you in your specific community. What does your community actually need? And is it something that you're willing to, or you have the, whether it's knowledge or even muscles to, like you said, swing a hammer. If it's swinging a hammer, then that's exactly what might be asked of you. And you're a big man and you can lift up some wood, then, that might be something that, whether, like you said, if you are in the office and you're a big man going to the gym, but on the side, on the weekends, you can be helping your neighbor out build their deck. You can be helping a friend out and getting paid for it. Building your broad scale of level of skills is more, I would say, accessible than ever, specifically to YouTube University. There's been there's a software company out over here in California that even lets you download an app and you can pay for a subscription, and it's literally just video series of full on trades skills, and you can at the end get a credential for it as well.
Yeah, I love that. And I think there's going to be more of those that exist. It is an interesting dichotomy. And as I've become more interested in trades education, thinking about like the future of how we enable individuals to build businesses in the trades. And again, on my wide spectrum of trades from HVAC plumbing all the way to drone operation and trapping is credentialing, right? Like I think that's one thing where there's not a lot of reciprocity across states when you go from trade to trade. Whether it's union, whether it's self-taught at like a College of Western Idaho, like there's such a big chasm of what it means to be credentialed. Like I'm credentialed in my little night welding thing. That's stick welding, and I don't think I could go and start slapping buildings together. But like, how do you start to drive that common denominator state to state where you have reciprocity and can allow people mobility to go where the jobs are at not a huge cost, at not a huge like 4 or 5 year commitment. Now, there are things that require that commitment for sure to make sure that you have people doing it the right way. But like, how do you start to kind of figure out how education levels out across all these trades? I don't have an answer, but I think it's an interesting area where I'm starting to see more nonprofits play, where my own personal interest is playing, which is pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Just that right there, Zach, brings up several questions for me. But let's stick to, do you see the trades, the employers or the businesses adapting to the trades gap right now?
I
And
hope
what do you
so.
think what do you think they're doing?
It's interesting. Employers versus educators are very different. I'll speak from my experience and all the interviews that I did for the book. Because when I did the book, I talked to tradesmen and women from all different trades, stages in life. And, I'm a product manager. That's what I do day to day. So I'm always focused on like, what does a customer want? Like, what are they asking for? It's not, I'm going to build a product for you. It's like, what do you actually need? What's a problem you have that needs solved? And through line across every single person I talk to in the trades is like, wow, yeah, everybody wants more pay. That's one, of course. But the second, and probably more important, is healthcare is so sporadic across all of these things. Like a lot of people are picking trades or picking businesses just based off their ability to have some level of coverage that doesn't break the bank. So I think even just addressing like the ability to get healthcare early on, even when you get to your education stage, that is like somehow leveled off or affordable at different tiers as you grow in your career is one. And then another one is just access to capital. There are tons of people who have great ideas, have great ability to deliver in whatever trade they're in. And there is actually enough of a vacuum where if someone did build a new business, it would do well, but they don't have the capital to start. So, like giving access to capital to qualified people, getting healthcare in a meaningful way for those individuals, I think that is a good starting point for any company to start targeting to figure out. Because I think that is one of the deterrents for people either getting into the trades, staying in the trades, and ultimately, growing the interest overall.
Absolutely. I mean, I think one of the points you make about capital available to small businesses that don't have the volume or the staff or the expertise on training, being able to bring somebody in to train on a micro level for their particular business would be something that make that business a lot more attractive to a potential employee, as opposed to a plumbing company that's got 75 trucks out there and they can afford to have a training department.
Yep.
Yeah, you
Yeah, I
got to.
think that kind of universal level of figuring out how you bring that to every tier of business, the small mom and pop to that 75 truck plumbing company to, a more private equity backed large plumbing company. Like it goes all the way up top to bottom on that. Like, how do you do that? And ultimately, I hope and think that drives retention across employees, which is another big issue of people sticking around because they need to feel like they have some level of ownership in these companies, and that's not there either.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, you get into the culture, and we've talked a lot about that, and what's the skills ladder, or the what's my different steps through the company. Am I going to top out in 4 years? You know, just being the lead technician. Sometimes that's not enough potential for somebody, and they're going to go to a larger company.
Yep, 100%. We have to figure out how to foster. Like, there's going to be people who are happy to be where they're at and just ride it out, and that's great. Those are people. I have those people in the tech world too. Like, people are happy where they're at. They don't have an ambition, but a lot of people do, and we need to, especially young kids coming out of high school, figuring out what they want to do with their lives. Like, there needs to be some, not necessarily a playbook, but a roadmap to say, like, your ambition will take you as far as you want to go. And if you are the most ambitious, you're dedicated, you are disciplined, you're smart, sky's the limit. And here's how you can kind of get what you want. And then there's anything in between that level of ambition and not. And I have not seen good roadmaps across all the trades to say, like, you can. There's a lot of gatekeeping. There's a lot of, um, if I didn't do it, you shouldn't be able to do it. And we need to change that mindset, especially for kids, to say, like, as much as it is, the world's your oyster and you can go get it. Um, Honest with them. It's not going to be easy. There's going to be competition. It's going to take grinding and capital and these other things that you need to learn about, but you can do it and buckle up and go for it. And we'll cheer you on. And that's what I haven't seen or heard of from people who've been in the industry, for, much longer than I have.
Yeah, and there's also the you come in at early 20s, single, and just want enough of a paycheck so you can afford a big truck and go have fun. And then by the time you're 30, now you got a wife and a kid, and your goals change a little bit, and you need, okay, how do I move up the ladder? I need to make more money, have more responsibilities, have more traditional uh, goals now.
Yeah, that's a huge thing that, I mean, I heard from you, Zach, right now, where you kind of set a little roadmap of how we can influence these kids, where we're catching them at a age where they have some ambition, they have these ideas, they have goals, they have dreams. And I think it's something that parents, educators can really hone in on. But you kind of mentioned like where it's almost like a gatekeeping feeling behind of, well, we know that these are good things to go into and to learn from. But how do we change that for the parents and schools to help the young people to see that differently?
You know, I don't know. I wish I had all the answers. I think it starts with the parents. I hope my book will do a lot for parents who have kids who are in high school or the high school kids themselves to read and understand at least one cautionary tale of like college or bust doesn't always work out the way you want it to, and to at least open your eyes. So I think it starts with the parents, and the parents like my kids are young, but I have people or friends my age who have teenagers, and they're starting to have those conversations. And my friends are ones who were brought up in that college or bust era, and they have a really hard time letting go of the idea of their kids not going to college and going into something else. And I actually saw yesterday um, a congressman from West Virginia just entered a bill. I think it's in the very early stages of, for those listening, there is something called a 529 fund for college education, which is a fund that parents can open and put tax-free dollars into it to save for college education, essentially. It's been around for a long time. People will put money into it. Like they might open one when their kid's born and slowly put funds so that they have, tax-free dollars to put towards college education. This congressman, and I don't know his name, but he's from West Virginia, is doing that essentially for the trades, where you can have a 529 that is tax-free dollars that you can start investing early for your child, but it goes specifically to trade-related education, tools, trucks, and that capital we talked about. So maybe if you start doing that for your child now, by the time they're 18, 19, graduate high school, they might actually have a little bit of tax-free capital to put towards, their trade school, anything else like that. So I think it's those kinds of things where we start to not model trades the same way we did college, but like in this instance, I think it works. But just pulling into the zeitgeist for parents that it is a viable thing. Again, showing that ability to climb the ladder. Like my son's going to be a plumber. Like that's not looked down on as like, oh, my son's a plumber. It's like, oh, my son's a plumber. And he's got a pathway if he wants to take it and grapple with it to have a very successful, white picket fence life that was promised to all of us in America, decades and decades ago.
I think that's pretty huge. If your parents are in the trades or you're in the trades and you have a child that's you're taking advantage of that fund. I mean, you could lay out the business plan stuff for them in their mid-teens. Okay, here's what you need to do all through high school. Focus on these type of education classes. You're going to own your own business by the time you're 20.
100%. Yeah, we'll have to look up, maybe in post, you guys can look up which senator or congressman rather it is, and I can send it to you afterwards. But it's very interesting. Who knows if it's going to have opposition or pass, but the bill's been introduced, and I think it's a great starting point. And we're starting to see these pockets pop up all over the place where people are talking about trades. How do we, with the retirement factor of people leaving, there's not enough folks to replace them, and just this general approach has to be rethought, and there has to be new things done. And I think that's why this podcast is great, and just elevating that on a national level is imperative.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, like you mentioned, if it was West Virginia or even in Virginia, like we were mentioning earlier, we had a guest. It was Paul Steiner from the ACE classes. He's with the Fairfax County of education and for adults and community education. So there's things that are moving in that right direction for bills to be passed, things that are being expressed into the our leaders, our government leaders. So hopefully that's what I think. Something that you mentioned, Zach, like parents need to really hone in on exactly where their kids are going to be in the next 10 years. And because again, with dreams and hopes and goals, it can't be manifested without some guidance. And I think that's where parents and schools and education and communities can really come into place and help bring that up together. So I love to hear that, there's just those updates. So yeah, I think we'll look it up and share it
Well,
out to
I just
everybody.
did briefly. So it's Congressman Riley Moore from West Virginia, and it's called the Jumpstart Savings Act. Strengthen
Jumpstart.
America's skilled workforce.
Good. We'll do some follow up on that.
Yeah. Love it. That's awesome. I
So,
mean,
Zach, do you
yeah.
got a couple of recommendations that um, we should start doing to help lessen the trades gap?
Boy, well, first off, grab the book. That's always number one. I would always appreciate that. The Trade Gap. You can get it on Amazon, anywhere else like that.
That book?
Yeah, yeah, that book, that book.
Yeah.
Eh, I do think there's a lot in there. I'm pushing it not just for my own selfish reasons, but I went really hard into the history, and I do touch on where and how we can start changing the education landscape. Um, there's a lot about lobbying, like working with your local and state governments on like exactly what we just talked about, these bills that are introduced to strengthen that. Like, you have to be an active participant. You can be an active participant, one, in your own household. If you're someone like me who grew up in the college or bust era, open your aperture, look a little bit more broadly, understand what it means to own a business in the trades, whether, again, that's knitting on Etsy or all the way to owning like a huge HVAC company and everything in between. Educate yourself, like, think about it. Like, are those businesses viable? Yeah. Maybe they don't have the 100x multiplier that some of these software companies have, but they're, 4, 5x EBITDA. Like, they're great businesses to be in right now, and they can't be exported. So educate yourself. Then educate your kids or educate your neighbors' kids. Talk to them about it. What do they want to do? Challenge children when they talk about going to college, not in a mean or dispiriting way, but say, hey, like, what's the game plan? Jeff, you talked about it. What's the ROI? You're going to go pay this money, but what are you going to get out of it? Are you guaranteed a job? Probably not. Like, what's your backup plan? Do you have a backup plan? Do you realize you could do something else and maybe get more out of it than you expect? And I think having those conversations, just like Danny, you said, like on a local community level, is imperative, and that's where it starts. Anything bigger than that, like, it's above my pay grade.
Yeah, yeah. Especially three
We
guys
need
on
to
a
pay you more
podcast.
than Zach.
No, that's awesome. I mean, that community aspect, and just it's a huge thing that we can all kind of hone in on, and really, I think, develop a little bit more within our full circle. And it's just like I mentioned, if you got a skill, you got something to help your neighbor out with, I think it just starts right there.
Yep.
That's a huge thing.
Yeah.
And I'm
And
not.
like, I learned to weld initially from my neighbors when my trailer broke.
Yeah,
I was
exactly.
scared of electricity and, everything else like that. And someone literally grabbed my hand, and it was like in the movie, Ghosts guiding pottery. I had an old man behind me, like, guiding my hand on how to, like, actually put two pieces of metal together.
Heck yeah, exactly. Yep, we got to come together, help each other out. One question right here, Zach. On you got an Instagram handle. It goes by "Let Me Die Learning."
Mhm.
Throw, let us know why you chose that.
I mean, it's relatively self-explanatory, but like, I've always been a very curious person. Like I said, I grew up urban. Um, didn't do a lot of hands-on things. I relied much heavier on the system to support me. I hunted at the grocery store. Someone would always change my oil for me if I drove up to, whatever little kiosk was there. And I had a little bit of a reckoning with my own self of understanding how reliant I was in, systems that I don't control. And I might be a little OCD and like to control things. And it just spread, like, like, I should learn how to change my oil. I should learn how to get food for myself and my family if I needed it. And it just started this like true love of learning. Like, I'm never going to be an expert in any of these things. I'm never going to be an expert welder. I'm never going to be an expert electrician, but I can still learn it. I can go and, like, worst case scenario, I understand how that light switch in my house works. Best case scenario is something that can, help pay my bills in another event like I went through in the past. So, like, it's a very simple hedge against the unknown for me, is to just constantly be learning. Um, like, trappings taught me how to sew. And I pop a hole in a pelt, you don't just throw it away, you sew it up. So I had to learn how to whip stitch. Like, it's things like that, just start to add up. And again, I feel like a, jack of no trades, but like, I know a lot I know a little about a lot of things. And it's very empowering. And so I just want to be skirting into my grave, hopefully with an open mindset to learn new things, whether it be technology, whether it be hands-on skills, and anything between.
That's great. I love it. Let me die learning right there. That's a good lesson for everybody, and it's something that I think Jeff and I have always had a little motto of. We're if you're not learning, you're dying in a sense.
Yeah. No, I think you're at the next level too, Zach. You're probably at aspire to inspire before you expire.
Yep. I like that saying. My wife just says, please don't actually die while you're learning on some of the things I do. But yeah, if I do, I'm going to go out with at least being like, I probably shouldn't have done that. That was a hard lesson to learn. But
Well, when
Uh,
it gets there, we'll see how it goes. Well, just a great way again. One, shine the light on someone that has a lot of great knowledge and a different perspective from the trades side of things, especially out there in Ohio, Idaho, excuse me. And just exciting to have you on the show, Zach, and just learn more about you, your fam, and just what projects you got going on. So again, just shout out everything. How can we reach out to you? What's the best way for people to get your book and reach out?
yeah, well, first off, thank you. Thank you to both of you. Obviously, I've watched your show. That's why I reached out, and I appreciate everything you guys are doing. As far as what I'm doing goes, like, please, go pick up the Trade Gap book. You can get it on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, kind of wherever you get your books. It's the Trade Gap, Zachary Craig Hansen. I've got other books out there too. One's called Turning Feral. That was actually my real bestseller. That's all about my kind of journey from being an urbanite to living out in the woods and learning everything the hard way with a little bit of humor touched in there. I do have some social media. Yep, LinkedIn is one, but then Instagram is very inactive lately. By my own desire to not be as active, but it's at Let Me Die Learning. I'm happy to have people reach out, ask questions. I'm an open book in that regard, so please do.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, we'll put that information out there. Jeff, any last words?
I think it's a great book. I enjoyed reading it. It gave me some really great insights about how we as a country got into this problem. And we're putting together some good solutions with the help of people like Zach.
Absolutely. And the next book Zach's going to be writing is How We Got Out of It. So that's awesome.
Let's hope so. Let's hope so.
All right, cool. Thanks again. You guys listen to this awesome podcast, share it with everybody out there, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, guys.